No. I 100% believe that I would not have done the things I've done the last 5 years if it had not been for my husband's death. And I'm obviously, I'm not grateful for losing him. I miss
Oh,
him every single day, but I'm grateful that I've been able to find some meaning in my
mm-hmm.
grief and be able to use it to help other people and to help myself. And that was really, the first thing I had to help myself first.
Welcome to RenewHer, a podcast for women over 50 ready to reignite their energy and explore what's next. I'm Genell Lemley, brain fitness coach. Here, you'll hear real stories from women taking on new challenges after 50, along with brain health tips to boost focus, energy, and the mindset to move forward with confidence. Let's dive into today's episode. Hello, and welcome back to RenewHer. Today's guest is someone I've been looking forward to introducing you to. I met Dr. Susan Edkins through LinkedIn. She was sharing thoughtful posts about grief after losing her husband, along with practical guidance for navigating the difficult emotions that follow such a profound loss. Because we share the experience of losing our husbands, I reached out to her. We scheduled a Zoom call, and from the very beginning, our conversation felt effortless. We've stayed connected ever since. And I wanted to invite Susan onto the podcast because she embodies something I talk about on Renew Her, beginning again. Sometimes we choose a beginning, and sometimes life chooses it for us. Susan's story is one of those unexpected beginnings. After unexpectedly losing her husband in her 50s, Susan found herself on an entirely new path, one that ultimately led her to help other women navigate grief, major life transitions, and nervous system regulation. As many of you know, I'm passionate about brain health, and we simply can't talk about brain health without talking about the nervous system. When our nervous system is constantly in survival mode, it affects everything from how we think and feel to how we heal. Susan provides practical education, compassionate guidance, and beautiful meditations that help people find steadiness when life feels uncertain, overwhelming, or simply heavy. Let me tell you a little bit more about her by reading her bio, and then we'll move into her story. Dr. Susan Edkins is the founder of Dragonfly Integrated Health and a nervous system educator, Reiki master teacher, hypnotherapist, Akashic Records practitioner, and meditation teacher. After the unexpected loss of her husband in 2021, she combined her 35 years of experience in higher education and her doctorate in kinesiology with her own healing journey to help women navigate grief and life's biggest transitions. Through guided meditations, energy healing, and nervous system education, Susan helps women move from survival mode to greater calm, steadiness, and hope. She is also the creator of Calm the Overwhelm, a 4-week course that teaches practical, gentle tools for working with the nervous system instead of against it. Susan, I'm so glad you're here. Welcome.
Thank you so much for inviting me to come. I'm very excited to talk with you today.
Great. Well, that's good because I have so many questions. So let's jump in.
Okay.
So I know very recently you honored the 5th anniversary of your husband's passing, and I'm so
Yes.
sorry for your loss. And I'd love to begin there because in many ways that became the beginning of a completely different chapter of your life.
Yes.
So before we talk about your journey, would you just tell us a little bit about your husband?
Yeah. He was an amazing man. He was a high school principal at the time of his death, but he had started as a health and physical education teacher, and he just made life so much fun. The picture that I shared the other day on LinkedIn was him wearing this like candy cane looking suit. And it was at Christmas time. He was wearing it in the morning in the drive-through, the carpool line, and handing candy canes out. So, I mean, that is just, he loved to have fun. And he had this gift for making everybody feel like they were special. And when he died, obviously that left a huge hole in my life and the life of our kids. We have 3 boys. But I was just overwhelmed by all of the people who reached out to me after he passed away, people who had been his students, who had played soccer. He was a soccer coach early in his career, people who worked for him, with him. So, it really made me start thinking about what is my legacy? And am I really doing with my life what I'm meant to be doing? And so I think probably most women who have some kind of a major transition have that moment where they're not sure who they are. And that is scary. I know that you've experienced that as well and probably had those moments too.
Yeah, I mean, because part of your identity is
Oh, yeah,
tied up
yeah,
in that. And then you're
yeah,
like, okay, who am I now? Right? And
yes.
yeah.
And I think I've had multiple iterations of who am I in the last 5 years. You go from being a wife to being a widow, and I don't want that to be my only identity. But I do work with other widows, so it is an important part of my story. But when somebody asks me, like in my healing journey, somebody asked me, "Who are you?" I couldn't answer that question without saying, what my job is. Like, I'm a mom, I'm a teacher, I'm a this, I'm a that. I didn't know who I was. And so that really started my whole quest to figure out who I was.
So when it first happened, because it was suddenly,
Yes.
correct?
Yes. He had a heart attack.
Can you tell us a little bit about the day that everything changed? And when it happened, did you ever imagine, and that's part of maybe the, going through that who am I piece and so forth, but did you ever imagine that you could feel meaningful or joyful again when it happened?
Probably not immediately. Like the first couple of days, I barely slept, I barely ate. I did know, like, really early on that I needed to move my body. I didn't know why, and now I know it was my nervous system, like, screaming for some regulation. I just knew I needed to get outside and I needed to walk, and it was July. I live in North Carolina. It was hot as could be. So I would go early in the morning and walk, and I had not been doing a good job of being physically active before that happened. I just knew after he died that I had to keep moving. And I was way more productive than normal. I was really fortunate. I had a couple of good friends who were widows who reached out to me, and then also some other friends that were like, okay, what do we need to get done? Let's make a list, because I couldn't even think. It took me a couple years to understand the profound impact of the grief on my brain. But that initially I was super productive. I was just in go mode. And I think it was partly because then I didn't have to think about it. I didn't have to deal with the stuff. I was checking stuff off my list and feeling good. I'm like, yeah, I got that done. I got that done. And so it took me a while of being, 100 miles an hour before I finally crashed. My body was like, yeah, we can't do this anymore. And then it would take me a couple more years really to fully understand the impact, like I said, on my brain. I knew I had brain fog. I knew I couldn't concentrate, but I didn't understand fully how much grief was impacting my body as a whole.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what did grief feel like physically, for you? Because, like I said, it's not just emotional.
Yeah. So looking back, my body hurt. My body felt tight. And again, I didn't fully understand that was related to the grief at the time. What I did notice when I made a connection to my body, I tried a couple of different like traditional grief groups. The first two were for widows specifically. And then the last one was a more like general one. And I realized in the second and third one that my legs would start to hurt while I was in one of the sessions. And at first, I thought it was, psychosomatic. So I said my husband had a heart attack. I did CPR on him. I had to run up and downstairs. Thank God we were the only two who were at home at the time. Our kids were out of town. But, my legs were sore in the couple of days after because I was physically exerting that moment, right? For the couple of hours or hour. It felt like forever. I don't think it was that long. So I thought it was just my brain associating that leg pain, but it lasted and it would start to hurt and I would feel like I needed to move. And the last grief group thing I went to, I wanted to bolt. Like I wanted to get up and run out of there. I didn't want to be rude. And of course, it was at my church, and it was like I was on the far side of the room, and it would have been really disruptive. So I just sat there and said, if I can get through this, I'm never coming back to this group again. But my legs would hurt for the rest of the night. So I finally talked to my doctor, and I had a functional medicine provider, and I'm really, really grateful for her and that I talked to her about it because she told me that it sounded like stuck energy. And I was like,
what's that?
I don't know. And so she explained, I had heard of the chakra system before, but I didn't fully understand it. And the root chakra is the lowest, that's in your pelvis.
Right.
What I've learned in the last few years is that we store emotions in our hips, particularly in our like unexpressed emotions in our right hip. I didn't know any of that at the time. I had a career in athletic training, so I really understood the body and the impact of injuries and exercise. I understood all of that from a Western medicine perspective, but I didn't realize that there were like real connections between our emotions and physical things, and that when we don't express our emotions and when we don't deal with our emotions, they can actually cause disease. And I didn't really know that then.
Right.
So she asked me if I'd be open to trying Reiki. And I said, I've heard of it, but I don't know what it is. If it's going to help me, I'm willing to do anything. And so I tried it, and it was incredibly helpful. And that kind of started my journey. I had started meditating probably a couple months before that. And I was appreciative of that, the assistance that gave me. But I needed another kind of bump of something more than that.
For those who might not be familiar with Reiki, could you just maybe a short description of what it is and what it did for you?
Yeah. So it's an energy modality, and it's actually one of the most researched energy modalities. They've shown how it can impact. Really what's happening is it's not my energy when I'm doing Reiki on somebody. It's channeling it from a higher source. And it basically goes through me, and our biofields interact with one another. And it's really a heart-to-heart connection. I always set the intention that, whatever happens in the session is for their highest good. And so I think even, and the research would show this, that some of the sham, they call it sham Reiki, they taught actors how to do the hand positions and then had them do it. And some people felt better. So some of it is just that human connection between our hearts. If you've heard of heart coherence before, our energies kind of align with one another. And if I'm calm as the Reiki practitioner and I'm channeling this calming energy, is going to help. It helps release blockages. It helps realign. And it really has to do with the biofield. It's realigning their biofield.
Okay.
I
So,
don't know if that helps.
yeah,
But
no, that was good. Yeah, because I wasn't aware until the past few years as well about the chakras, although they've been around their
I
ancient
know.
history.
Exactly.
I had really been aware of what they were and the impact that they
Yeah.
have, whether the
Yeah.
chakras, the Reiki, and all of those energy healing,
Yeah. We're just not really
modalities.
exposed to that
Right.
stuff. And Western medicine, I think, is becoming more open, particularly with Reiki, because there are some people who are medical Reiki, like they've gone through training to provide it in a medical setting. And there's another form of Reiki called healing touch that a lot of nurses practice with their patients, particularly cancer patients. And it's not curing the cancer, it's just helping alleviate. It's really good with pain. It just helped me feel so much calmer. And I think that was what was most beneficial. The very first time I tried it, I felt a shift and I couldn't explain why, but I knew I felt better when I left that day. I went back 2 weeks later and did another session, and I decided that day I wanted to learn how to do it, and I wanted to use it to help other people feel better because it made me feel. Now, it didn't make my grief go away, and it
Right.
wasn't
Oh,
like a magic wand or anything like that, but I definitely could feel a difference.
because could you feel the difference? Yeah, like physically in
I
your
could feel a
body.
shift, and I actually could feel it while she was doing the Reiki on me. My body felt like I felt like my legs were up in the air and I was on my side. And I was like, how is she doing that? Because I had my eyes closed. I opened up my eyes and I'm like, okay, I'm laying just as flat as I can be. So I could just feel the energy shifting.
Okay.
So I don't know. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but it helped. And at
Mm-hmm.
that point, I was willing to do anything that was going to help me to feel better.
In addition to Reiki, you mentioned meditation.
Yes.
So I'd like to spend some time talking a little bit about that, because how did you come about, if you want to say, discovering it? Is it something that you had done prior to your husband's passing, or something that you started after? And were you open to it? Were you skeptical? Or tell me a little bit
Okay.
about it.
I was skeptical. So
Okay.
I had taken my students, my college students, to a mindfulness course. We were working with somebody in the counseling center because they had, at the end of their education, they had a high stakes exam that they had to take. And most of my students were first generation college students, and the anxiety, they all thought they were bad test takers. And so I had sat in there with them for the mindfulness. And my thing was, I can't sit still. I can't clear my head. And the instructor said, that's not what this is, that you don't have to do that. But I really didn't believe him. So that was several years before. And then one of my friends from the doctoral program that I had just completed like the year before, we were in a group text and they had been supporting me throughout that first year. And she's like, I really, really think you need to try meditation. Like, I just can't sit still. I can't clear my mind. I don't have an hour. And she said, that's not what it has to be. And she suggested an app and she said, just give it a try. And I did. And the first, few days were hard, but I committed to trying, and it got easier and it got better. And I realized I didn't have to have a clear mind. So when I teach meditation now, that is the first thing. I teach them how to connect with their breath, because that helps to bring you back. If your mind wanders, just pay attention to your breathing again. And then I normalize. You're going to have thoughts come in your mind. Sometimes they're intrusive thoughts. And I like to pretend like they're clouds. And sometimes I'll say, okay, thanks for popping up. I'll deal with you later. And I just kind of imagine, and sometimes I have to move them, use my hand and push them by. But it has definitely gotten easier as I've practiced it.
What changed, if you will, once you started practicing it? It sounds like then you started practicing it more consistently. What
Yes.
what did you notice, or how did you use it?
So the first thing that I noticed was that my blood pressure went down. I was
Okay.
having issues. And so I was like, ooh, okay. Well, I wasn't, looking at that as a result, but that's a positive indicator. My heart rate went down. And so I used those physical things. I did start to feel better, but those were the first two things that I was like, okay, this is
Those are
this is
big.
helping
Yeah.
me, so I'm gonna keep doing it.
Definite markers to measure
Yes.
by.
Yeah,
Yeah.
biomarkers, yeah, yeah.
Right.
And
So,
and when we have scientific minds, a lot of times you need those indicators, right? That
mhm.
was why Reiki was so hard for me at first, to understand, because I didn't understand what it was doing, how it was working. But yes, those biomarkers are helpful.
So, why is calming the nervous system such an important part of healing, not just grief, but any major life transition that you might be going through or trauma that you're holding?
So when we are in any kind of major transition, and grief obviously is can be very significant, but losing a job, getting divorced, becoming an empty nester, all of those things have a major impact on our nervous system. And we get stuck in that fight or flight mode. And it's just, our nervous system is designed to protect us. And that's what it's trying to do, but it gets stuck in that loop. And every little thing feels like it's so major, and it just triggers that fight or flight response. And so it can get really hard to shift back out of it. I like to use short practices that you can do throughout the day. So when you notice that you're kind of starting to get triggered or to feel like you're getting dysregulated, whatever words you want to use, then if you can do a couple of the short practices, can just really make a big difference. And that's what I like to teach, because most people don't have, a ton of time. Or if you're at work or you're getting ready to walk into a big meeting or whatever, you can't go and do something that takes a long time. The short strategies really are beneficial. And that was kind of like a light bulb moment for me when I realized I could do something quick that could help shift me and then keep on moving with my day.
Mm-hmm. It's through your meditation and your Reiki, because you started as being a client, a patient, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So at some point, though, your story shifted from not only just healing yourself, but then healing others.
Yes.
So looking back, when did you realize maybe that your life wasn't over, that there was still this other chapter waiting to be written using these different modalities? How did that all
So
come
the
about?
first the first time I had that thought was the second time I went for a Reiki session.
Okay.
And I told the practitioner at the end, I'm like, I want to learn how to do this, and I want to do this to help other people. It would take me another year and a half before I started my business. But before my husband died, if you had asked me if I would ever be a business owner, I would have said absolutely not. Like, that was not on my bingo card, as they say. I just had no thought of being an entrepreneur. And so I had to get my head wrapped around it. And I was training in all these different things over that time as well. So it took me about a year and a half before I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. Um, so
So did you ever, like when you were going through that, deciding to go down this path, because you still are at the time were, and you still
yeah,
teach at the university.
yes.
Did you ever feel too old to start something new? Did that even enter your mind, or no?
I don't think it did because I went back to get my doctorate when I was 51.
Good for you.
There was one other person in my cohort who is like maybe 6 months older than I was. So I had kind of gotten over the I'm too old to do something new because I spent 4 years year round getting my doctorate. Maybe a few times, because doubt always creeps in. I thought, is this crazy that I'm doing this? But I have a 15-year-old son. So I've got 2 older sons. We had a big gap between our second and our third. And so I have to pretend like I'm young, even when I don't feel like it.
Because I'm not saying by any means that 55 is old, but sometimes when we start getting older, if you will, you start questioning yourself.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to be 60 in November.
So did you, when you decided to do this, did you ever struggle with giving yourself permission to move forward? Was that ever anything that you encountered, and how did you work through that?
Are you talking about from the loss of my husband?
Yes, that's the direction I was thinking.
Yeah. So I don't think I have really moved forward, at least not from a relationship standpoint. But I don't know, because I know that he wouldn't want me to not be happy. I know that he would want me to, find somebody else or to do something else. This is kind of crazy. We actually had a conversation the weekend before he died. We went to the beach. We would usually go as a family for the 4th of July. But that year we just went, the 2 of us, and we talked about all these things that we never talked about. And one of the things we talked about, so when I look back, I'm like, I think his soul knew, obviously, what was getting ready to happen. And he was trying to get some ducks in a row, because he also tried to get his 2 best friends and their wives to come to the beach with us. But one of the things that he talked to me about was alternate ways to make money. And my academic program that I had at, was kind of part of our conversation. And he's like, I want you to do something else. I want you to do something that's going to make you happy. So we had, fortunately, that conversation. It would take me a while to remember that, maybe that specific part of it, but we definitely had talked about multiple different options. And he had even told me a couple people he wanted me to talk to about different things. And I didn't really do those things because they were all like teaching related. But, that I don't need his permission, obviously, but that felt like, support, guidance. When I look back, it just felt like it was meant to be. Not his death, but, that this was okay for me to move on. Mm-hmm. And I knew early that, maybe not that first year, but I knew that if sharing my story would help somebody else, that I was willing to do that. I was always open, and it made me feel better to talk about him. So I know that makes some people uncomfortable, and some of the people that I would talk to him about him, I think, were uncomfortable. But it helped me feel like he, like he was still here, or like he didn't disappear when he died. So I don't know if that makes sense, but
it makes sense. And the timing of that conversation.
I know.
Yeah. Wow. That's something.
His best friend broke his phone the day that we were driving down to the beach. And so he never got the messages that my husband was calling and asking him to come to the beach and hang out with us. And he didn't get the messages. So that's something that's been really hard for him. It felt like he was trying to gather us all. And the weekend before that, he was with all 3 of our boys and took them all to lunch. And, it just felt like when I look back, I can see how, like, he was tying up, I'm getting goosebumps, like tying up loose ends. And, COVID was bad for a lot of things, but we had time at home with all three of our boys in different time periods during that shutdown. And I look back at that too and feel like that was part of, I don't know, part of him tying up his loose ends or whatever. I don't know. I'm just really grateful that the kids had that individual time with him when we were all at home together
Yeah,
and much calmer and, doing more things outside and just more together time. I'm
right.
grateful for that.
So just to circle back for a second, you earned multiple certifications while teaching full time, raising 3 sons, maybe even during that time getting your doctorate. I don't know. No, that was before, right?
That was before
But
he
that was
died. Yep, I
before.
finished in 2020.
Okay. But still, doing all of that's no small accomplishment. How did you manage that season of getting through
So
that?
our older two boys were already gone from the home. Middle son was in college. Oldest son had just graduated from college. So it was just the youngest and I at home. I had some good friends who were a support system. I did struggle a lot with guilt, like if I was going to be gone for a course and, I was leaving him with somebody, or sometimes he would stay home by himself. But yeah, I did have a lot of mom guilt, especially early on. But I have talked to him openly and just said, I'm doing this for, to have a better life for us. And, it's something that makes me happy. It's making me feel better. So, he still struggles with it sometimes, but,
Sure.
but yeah, it was my support system, I think. And it was different people in different seasons who have supported us.
Mm-hmm.
That's been really helpful. I think one of the lessons, and I don't know if you experienced this too, but I didn't realize, like, when you're grieving, how many people all of a sudden are no longer in your life.
Yep.
And that, I think, was one of the most shocking things to me about becoming a widow. Like, the people I thought would be around weren't necessarily around. And then people that I did really think would be there for me were there for me whenever I needed something. So
Yeah,
yeah,
or
it's crazy how it shifts things.
initially they're there, but then they kind of over time, it
Yeah,
starts to fade. Yeah.
it does. And I get it, like
Mm-hmm.
that was the center of our world, but everybody else has their own
Right.
world. But one of the pieces of advice I like to give people when they're dealing with somebody who is grieving is to offer specific things, because call me if you need anything. You're not going to call.
Mm-mm.
Even if you need something, a lot of times you're not going to call. So if you say, hey, can I bring you dinner, next Tuesday? Or, hey, can I, hang out with your kids? Or can your kids go to a movie or whatever? I think that's easier, or maybe, yeah, it's just easier for a widow to be able to accept that help. A lot of women have a hard time accepting help anyway.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
And then when it's open-ended, it makes it even more difficult.
So far, we've talked about everything you did, if you will, after your husband's death, the healing, the learning, the certifications, building your business. I'm interested, and we started talking about this a little bit at the beginning, so now I'm kind of circling back to it.
Okay.
I'm interested in now who you've become through this journey, because you talked about you've gone through, various iterations, if you will.
Yeah.
At what point, and through that too, at what point did you realize that maybe you weren't just surviving anymore, but you were actually beginning maybe to live again? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I think it's been gradual, subtle. I don't think there's been one moment that I'm like, oh yeah, I feel like I'm living again. I did probably fake it for a while, just because, I knew I had my son watching me and I wasn't trying to pretend. I let him see me cry and whatever, but I do think that it just gradually evolved. And as I was learning new things and trying different things, I feel like I've grown and evolved. And I think, at my core, I'm a teacher. And
Mm.
that's what caused me, or not caused me, led me to create a course for women who are grieving or going through some major life transition, because I wanted to share some of the things that I've learned. I've kind of pulled a lot of different things together from my professional life and all the different healing modalities I've learned about, and I've sampled even more that I haven't learned how to do myself. But pulling all that together to try to help women understand what's happening in their body, in their nervous system with grief or a major life transition, and then how they can start to get it more back to normal so they feel less overwhelmed and steadier again.
It's a nice tie-in. I mean, having a passion of something that you've discovered and then being able to pull your teaching aspect together with
Yeah.
that and going
Yeah.
down that road. So you mentioned, and if you are willing to talk about a little bit about, you mentioned some of the changes or iterations of yourself. What have you learned about yourself along the way?
Gosh. Well, I learned that I was stronger than I ever thought that I could be.
Mm-hmm.
I can do hard things. I can persevere. I think that is really the maybe most important lesson that I learned. I also learned that I could be happy again. It was okay
Mm.
to grieve my husband, but to still live and to have joy. And that one I think is hard, because again, there was
Mhm.
guilt in, I shouldn't be having fun because he's not here.
Mhm.
I'll give you a little story. So he was a soccer player in college and then went on to coach early in his career. And when we first heard that the World Cup was going to be in the US, we made a plan. The older boys were going to be grown and gone, but we committed to the whole family going to a World Cup game. And then obviously my husband died before that happened. And my middle son bought tickets for him and the youngest to go. And he asked me, did I want to go? And I'm like, no, I don't. They were going to Atlanta. I said, let it be a boys' trip. I don't really like traffic. I don't really like crowds. So stay home. Well, then I kind of regretted that I didn't get a ticket. And one of my husband's college teammates reached out to me a couple of weeks, like a month ago now, and said, hey, I've got 2 extra tickets to this World Cup game in Atlanta. Do you want to go? And it was like on the Thursday, and then the boys were going down for a Sunday game. And I said, let me talk to my youngest, because he was going to have to go down and back, 7-hour drive one way twice in like a 5-day span. And at first he's like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to get. I'm like, hey, it's tickets to a World Cup game. I really kind of want to go. And I just felt like I needed to be there with him to experience that. And, I was sad because my husband wasn't going to be able to go, but I was excited because I was going to be there with him for his first World Cup game and my first World Cup game. And one of my friends suggested taking something of my husband's with me,
Oh.
so it was like he was there. And it took me a few days to figure it out, but I actually wore his wedding ring. And obviously I had to put it on a different finger. It's on my middle finger. I've been wearing it ever since. But I have an aura ring, and my aura ring holds it in place. But then that way I felt like he
Mhm.
was with us. And then actually when we sat down at our seats and I looked up, we were in section 333, and I was like, okay, well, if that's not a sign that he's here with us, I don't know what is.
So do you want to, for those who might not be familiar with 333, can you talk a little bit about that? Just so
Yeah,
that they
so
can tie it
those
together.
repeating numbers like that are called angel numbers, and
Mm-hmm.
again, I didn't know what that
Yep.
was, and it was my Reiki practitioner I said to her, I'm like, I don't understand. Like, I keep seeing 111 or 1111. I look at the clock and it was, constantly. And she said, those are angel numbers. And that's, they're signs that you're supported. And they have different meanings. But to me, I usually just look at it as confirmation that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, or, that it's just a wink or a nod from him that he's still around.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, too, I wasn't familiar with the whole angel number thing until, I don't know, a couple of years ago, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah.
A little late to the game, but
All the things, right? Learned so much since he passed away. But I, again, that scientific mind, I had to figure out, I'm like, I wanted to understand where he was and what was going on. And, and I think the one thing that like was a big turning point for me was somebody, and I knew this, we learned it in elementary school or at least middle school, that energy is not created or destroyed. It just changes form. And one day I heard that and it clicked with me because I thought I was losing my mind with the signs and things like that. Dragonflies were a sign for me, which is why I named my business Dragonfly Integrated Health and why I have them all behind me. But yeah, I just, was trying to make sense of things.
Yeah. So do you think the version of Susan, of this version, I should say, of Susan would exist had you not gone through this experience?
No. I 100% believe that I would not have done the things I've done the last 5 years if it had not been for my husband's death. And I'm obviously I'm not grateful for losing him. I miss him every single day, but I'm grateful that I've been able to find some meaning in my grief and be able to use it to help other people and to help myself. And that was really, the first thing I had to help myself first. So yeah, I am grateful for the lessons that I've learned. And I do not believe I would be where I am right now had I not lost him.
Yeah, it's so important, like I said, to find that meaning. Yeah. And,
Yes.
and that purpose. Yeah.
Yeah.
You've shared so much through your wisdom, through your experience. So I'd love to end by asking you to reflect just on a couple of things.
Okay.
We talked about this a little, but has losing your husband changed the way, or how has it changed the way you live your life today? Not just in what you maybe do, but how you live your life.
I definitely feel much more spiritual and much more connected. I'm more purposeful and much more mindful. I also have tried to express much more gratitude. Like I think I was taking a lot of things for granted. And I can remember, I have this vivid memory of when my middle son was only a couple years old and I was getting ready for work one morning. And I was just like, God, is this all there is to life? Like, it just doesn't seem, it seems like there should be more than this.
And what impact, the other question is, what impact do you hope your work has on the women who find you?
I hope it gives them some relief and really also lets them know they're not alone. Being a widow can be so isolating. Like we talked about how your friends sometimes disappear, and if you had a lot of common friends or a lot of couple friends, that's no longer comfortable a lot of times. So I just want women to know that there's hope and that you can be happy again, even though you can still grieve the person that you've lost. And you can feel back to yourself or reimagine somebody new. I really think probably every widow becomes somebody new afterwards. So it's possible to reinvent yourself even at an older age.
It's one of those that, it's because a woman maybe either chooses to take a new direction intentionally, or like in your case, it was unexpected. But then you find out a lot about yourself during that process and who you really are and what life really means and how dear you hold it,
Yeah. Yeah.
really.
And they're both hard on you. Even if you choose a new path, it still has an impact. That transition still impacts your nervous system. Like retirement for some people can be really difficult. And so that is something normally that we would say is a happy time, but it can have a similar impact on us as well.
Right, because it can be very stressful.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of unknowns, a lot of the
Yeah.
questioning that happens along the way.
Yeah.
Am I making the right move? Am I doing the right thing? And all of that goes with it. But
Yeah.
it definitely takes that strength or that inner strength, to work through all that. Yeah.
Yep.
So before we wrap up, first tell everyone a little bit about your new course, your guided meditations, and
Okay.
where they can learn more about working with you.
Okay. So the course is going to launch on July 15th. It's a 4-week. It's live 7:30 to 9 p.m. Eastern time. It's not 4 consecutive weeks, 2 weeks in July, 2 weeks in August. And I'll record. So if somebody misses one, I'll provide the recordings. And it's really it's designed to help them understand what's going on in their body and then to give them practical strategies to utilize when they notice a trigger. So there'll be some out of class, not really homework, but strategies that they can implement and support. So I've got that. And if this timing doesn't work for people, I'm sure I'll offer it again in the future. But I also have a meditation store. We can share that address. It's a Selfie store, and they would just download. So there's different meditations in there. Most of them are less than 12 minutes long. So there's, if people want to do things on their own, they have that option as well. And going back to the course, it's not just about meditation. It's going to provide them other tools and strategies. And it's really about finding what works best for you. They can connect with me on LinkedIn and Instagram. So I'm Dr. Susan Edkins, EDD on Instagram. And I think it's Susan Edkins, EDD on LinkedIn. And if they'll connect with me on either one of those platforms and send me a DM, I will send them a short, like a free short meditation called a moment of steadiness. It's like 3 minutes long, but you can use it over and over again and in one of those little short micro practices.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I appreciate that. Before I close out, I just want to ask if there's anything that we didn't cover that you would like to make sure and mention or add.
I'll give my email address too, in case somebody has a question about the course or isn't on one of those platforms. It's susan@dragonflyintegratedhealth.com.
Okay.
So they can just reach out to me that way.
Okay.
I think that's it.
All right. So, Susan, thank you so much for sharing your story with such honesty and generosity. And what I appreciate most is that you've shown us healing isn't about getting over grief. It's about really learning how to carry it while continuing to build a meaningful life. I also love that your story reminds us that some of our greatest purpose can emerge from our deepest pain, not because you would ever choose that pain, but because we choose what comes next. And this conversation to me is such a beautiful reminder that beginning again doesn't erase what we lost. Instead, it honors it by allowing us to keep living, growing, and becoming. So if today's conversation resonated with you, whether you're navigating grief, a major life transition, or simply feeling overwhelmed, I encourage you to connect with Susan. And I'll make sure to include the links to her website, her social media, guided meditations and courses, all of that in the show notes. So thank you again for being here. And thanks to all of you for spending time with us. Remember, it's never too late to renew your body, to renew your brain, and renew your life. So I'll see you next time. And again, thanks, Susan.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be here. I enjoyed having our conversation.
I loved it too. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Renew Her. If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't let it fade. Take even a small step toward what's next. If you found value in what you heard, please subscribe, leave a review, or share this podcast with a woman who's ready to take her next bold step. Together, we're building a community of strong, resilient women, navigating what's next with courage and purpose. Until next time, stay energized and keep embracing what's possible.